Hello, everybody. Cal Banyan here. I'm back, and I'm back with a really special guest, Dr. Gregory Brown, MD, psychiatrist, researcher, professor, and and most importantly, 5-path board certified hypnotherapist. And if this is your first video watching me talk to him, go back, because this is number 4 in a series of 4. We've talked about some really good stuff. We've talked about really his journey in going from into the world of hypnosis, and then 5-path and 7-path, and bringing it into the medical and medical school environment and his private practice. We talked about upcoming research that's being planned to show that well, first, for me, it's to show, but really scientifically to demonstrate whether or not there is a measurable difference here, if it's something that could maybe even become as well accepted as today mindfulness is. And then we also talked about, and this is a really biggie also, the one we just finished, is psychiatric medications and hypnosis. That is really good. We've got a really good video. So go back through those, and then you'll hit this one on the ground running. And today, he's going to be speaking at our symposium here in Dallas. It's the 5-Path International Association annual symposium. And he submitted an article, and he did a little 2-minute video for our members to see what it was about. And I thought, gosh, I'd like to give him a little bit more time and get that information out to everybody, because even though the symposium is actually for 5-pathers, we open the door to any open-minded individual and in any profession. All right, Greg, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing, Cal?
Well, you really hung in there. 4 videos. Wow.
Why not? I'm
Why
here.
not? Why not? All right. So, how do you want to start? Like you wrote this topic up. Tell me how that came about, that you wanted to do that.
Well, going back a little bit, when I was in training in my residency program, psychiatrists were starting to study these neural circuits that were involved with post-traumatic stress disorder, especially in veterans. And the assumption in every article after article after article was that these brain circuits are now cooked to each other. So you have like a car backfire outside, you're going to have a panic attack or a startle response forever, because the neurons are now connected and there's no way to unconnect them. And this was just the assumption for a decade.
Is that like the old conditioned response,
Yeah, the behavioral
salivate, right?
Yeah, that would be that's the behavioral explanation. But they're looking at these neural nets and making the same claim, essentially based upon the connecting the limbic system, where the emotional activity comes, and to the association cortex, where you get these memories. Now, in our language, that is the conscious mind being the frontal cortex, and then the emotion and the limbic system being the subconscious mind, and then feeling it in the body being the unconscious mind. But talking about it in those terms. So obviously, when you start looking at hypnosis and you are watching right in front of you that an emotional reaction to a previous event is now gone, it just happened. You see it. You can't unsee what you see. And it's also the case with some, EMDR, as an example, a counterexample, was being created in that same decade. And people who had EMDR had an absolute extinguishment of that negative emotion associated with the event. Here's another example of a technique in which we have eliminated the negative emotion. So the question then became, how? Because the biologists are saying it can't happen, and yet clinicians are watching it happen in front of their very eyes. So a researcher began looking at this, and he named this phenomenon memory reconsolidation theory. Now, I'll just warn you at the outset, if you go and buy his book, it is essentially unreadable. I mean, it is just it's it's like double downing into biology. And if you don't have a PhD in biology, and I don't, then it's a really tough read. But essentially, if you boil it down to the key points, what he demonstrated using brain imaging and chemical assays and a whole number of really sciencey kind of things is that if you bring a memory trace or a memory into awareness, and there is an emotion associated with that memory, and you do nothing, then when that memory fades out of awareness, the same emotion remains attached to the memory. And that is a flashback or a nightmare, right? A flashback is where a memory comes back, the emotion comes back, you don't do anything with it because you're terrified, and then it just goes back into memory as memory plus terrified as a single unified event.
Mhm.
So, and that's what the biologist and also the behaviorist would have talked about before. So what he demonstrated was if you could bring that memory into awareness with the emotion, and then radically change the physiology, which in our terms would be to change the emotion while the memory trace is still there,
Mhm.
then as long as you have successfully done that, when that memory drops back into long-term memory store, it is now associated with the new emotion. And this is profound because if we look, for example, at 5-path in doing a stage 2 age regression back to a point of fear, okay, you've brought up a memory or a representation of a memory with the fear attached. Now you go to before that event where the emotion can no longer be. And then you go through the process of making that memory no longer fearful through the informed child technique. And then you walk them back through that memory and there's no fear left. You have just done that process, which is highly biological and highly physiological from the understanding of memory consolidation theory. You've just done it. You have done the science. We didn't even have the science to know it was science when you were doing it in hypnosis for decades. I mean, in various forms, but
Right.
now there's the science to say, this is why it no longer bothers them
Yeah,
and why it doesn't come back.
and like I cut my teeth on John G. Watkins, PhD,
Hmm.
former president of the American Psychological Association, and he wrote, I think it was War Neurosis or something like that,
Hmm.
and it was, and I don't have the book in front of me, but it was during World War II. He's
Yes.
working with these people with what is now called PTSD, and he's the one that invented the informed child technique. And
Hmm.
I don't think it was called informed child technique, but he'd take people back then, knowing what you know now and letting them know. And that's really how I really first came to understand age regression and doing that kind of work. And so, and what's nice is when we can say, okay, this chemical thing is happening and this chemical thing is happening. And it's not just, what do we call that? Suggestibility that's going to wear off. Placebo,
Exactly.
not just placebo effect, right? That you do this, and they think they feel better and whatever. But you can say, well, this has physically changed in the brain, and this is how it's happening. Because then it becomes measurable in physical terms, right?
Exactly right.
Mhm,
Exactly.
mhm, mhm.
Exactly.
What an exciting time for the world of hypnosis.
Yes.
So exciting part of it. Yeah. I mean, I was doing stuff that I knew worked, but why it worked and stuff. All I could do is say, well, I could set up a reasonable sequence and say, well, if you do this and now you know that, and I come up with ideas like emotional resonance and things like that. And then but now we can say, okay, now we've got this biological chemical model that explains what's going on, and we just keep doing what we've always been doing, maybe even a little bit better. Awesome.
As an aside, we do know that some of these these responses will extinguish, which led to things like the behavior therapies to try to do this. But the problem is you don't create a new emotional state.
Mhm.
So if you don't have someone relive it and relive it and relive it and relive it and relive it until the emotion drops off, then when they leave the session, they're worse than they started
Mm.
because you've reinforced the negative emotion instead of changing it to something else. And that's what is so amazing about these techniques in comparison with some of the things that they try to make work.
Yeah, back in the older days of early psychoanalysis, they relied on catharsis and that kind of just the bleeding off of the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But now what we can do is we can associate the whatever was going on now with hindsight. And hindsight is
Exactly.
2020, right?
Exactly.
And so
Exactly
it can
right.
transform people so quickly. And how does this relate to seventh path?
Well, seventh path is exactly the same thing with every recognition you do.
Right.
Um, Essentially, if you say the recognition in your mind and the association, which comes up as the echo, has a negative emotional tone, an activation of the stress response system, you stop it quickly enough, you repeat the recognition. The recognition is much more relaxing and positive than that negative emotion was. And so it alters that when it goes back into long-term memory store again. So you're actually doing a mini version of that with every recognition that you say every time you do seventh path. And it's of course less I mean it's just positive if you have a positive echo, but when you have a negative echo that arises, that is exactly the same process that's happening.
Right. Just 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Awesome.
Hmm.
Good.
Hmm.
Is there anything else you think you could explain about that, or that you want to make more clear, or anything?
Well, I would say for fellow five pathers and seven pathers, if you take a look at the expanded model of the mind, where you have conscious, subconscious, unconscious, you see that these neural systems that are activating when that negative memory comes to the mind, it activates the emotion in the limbic system, which is the subconscious in that model. And then there's often a physical sensation that goes along with that high level of activation, whether it's a tightness in the stomach, a crushing sense in the chest. That's the unconscious level of processing. So you're seeing this entire process really well described in that model of the mind that Cal provides in the training, and that is just a roadmap to this. So what happens then is you've activated that process with bringing up the event. You move back before the event. Now the emotions and the beliefs from the subconscious are being changed, and then when those are changed, you don't have the physical activation in the body anymore because you're not activating that meaning system going to the unconscious that then had the bodily sensation. So then when it is reconsolidated in memory, when you think of that conscious thought again, the subconscious emotion and belief system is different. So it's no longer activating. And that's the way you would put it in hypnotic language instead of that biological language. And I would just say, modify your description of what's happening to match your client's needs, because
Mhm.
some clients could care less about science. So talk to them the way you always talk to them. Some clients really want a scientific explanation of everything.
Mhm.
It, use this, match what their needs are so that you're matching your explanation to what your client needs so they can understand it best.
Awesome. Speak their language, match their level of how they understand the world or want to.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yes, and then, we talk about five path, we talk about seven path, but boy, when you put the two together, like we
Mm-hmm.
teach in class, along with the secret language of feelings, and you just have clients or patients coming back to you and go, I feel better. And, or, what's funny is they'll change at the subconscious level. Okay. And they'll even deny, oh, I
Oh,
was
yeah.
never that bad before. Right.
Oh, yes.
It's like, I was never that bad. You go back to your notes and go, you're using the word terror, frozen, all this kind of stuff. And so some clients, I'll use SUD scales, subjective units of
Oh,
distress.
mm,
And so I'm working with this one person that was learning disabled, and then they got some kind of infection in their brain, and they just went down to what he called himself level 1 functioning, floating anxiety of like
Mm.
8, 9, and just and I can just plot the points on each session. And you'll have some bumps in the road, something happened and stuff, but then he just keeps going on that improvement or reduction of anxiety. And I said, just keep say the recognition, wait for the echo, and that gets it done. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm really happy we managed to get these 4 important videos done, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the symposium. And anything you want to say to wrap it up?
I think that covers it. It's awesome.
All right.
Be at the symposium yourself.
That's right. I'd love to see you guys there. I'd love you walk and go, I saw you on the video, right? So all you folks out there, I do 3 or 4 certification courses every year, and we are literally turning out among the best hypnotists, hypnotherapists in the world, using some of the most powerful techniques. I'd love to see you in class. Check out the website, look around, and if you have any questions, just give us a call. We understand that you have questions. All right, that's it for now. Cal Banyan signing off.
Take
Bye,
care.
Doc. Bye, Greg.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, if you ever want to do it again, you let me know.
Anytime you need it, Cal, just reach out. No problem.
Beautiful.
I'll always make time for you.
All right. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll see you at the symposium, if not before. Who knows?
Very good. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.